The winter sun on the Arctic tundra is a ghost of its southern cousin. For months, it barely crests the horizon, casting long shadows across a landscape of ice that stretches beyond human comprehension. In this world of perpetual twilight, where temperatures plummet to 50 degrees below zero, and the wind cuts through anything that dares to stand upright, the question of what to eat becomes the most fundamental calculation of existence. The Inuit people, who have called this frozen realm home for more than 4,000 years, did not merely survive these conditions, they thrived. Their diet, forged through millennia of observation, experimentation, and intimate knowledge of the Arctic ecosystem, represents one of humanity's most remarkable adaptations to an environment that seems designed to reject life itself. So to understand what Inuit families ate during the brutal winter months, we must first grasp the stark reality of their world. The Arctic is a marine desert. Annual precipitation in many regions barely exceeds that of the Sahara. When winter arrives, the land becomes a white void. The berries that sustained families during the brief summer disappear beneath meters of snow. The roots and plants that provided variety to the diet freeze solid in permafrost that extends hundreds of feet below the surface. The caribou, whose migration patterns dictated the rhythm of inland Inuit life, vanish southward to escape the harshest cold. What remains is the sea, locked beneath ice that grows thicker with each passing week, and the creatures that swim beneath it. The Inuit winter diet was not chosen from abundance. It was carved from scarcity through ingenuity and courage. The foundation of winter survival was seal. The ringed seal, called natik in Inuktitut, is a creature perfectly designed for Arctic waters. Weighing between 100 and 150 pounds, with a thick layer of blubber insulating its body from water that hovers just above freezing, the seal provided Inuit families with everything they needed. But hunting a seal in winter was not a matter of simply going to the ice and catching one. The ringed seal is an air-breathing mammal that must surface regularly. Yet in winter, the ocean is covered by ice that can grow 6 feet thick. The seals survive by maintaining breathing holes, scraping away new ice growth with the strong claws on their front flippers. These holes, called agluit, become the focal point of one of the most patient hunting techniques ever developed by humans. The hunter, dressed in caribou skin clothing that trapped warmth in thousands of hollow hairs, would walk across the sea ice, searching for these breathing holes. The snow might be windswept and smooth, or it might be piled into drifts taller than a man. Each hole was invisible from a distance, marked only by a small dome of snow that formed from the seal's breath, freezing in the air. Finding these holes required an understanding of seal behavior, ice formation, and wind patterns that took a lifetime to develop. The hunter knew that seals maintained multiple breathing holes across a territory, rotating between them to avoid predators. He knew that a seal could hold its breath for more than 20 minutes, and he knew that the slightest sound or shadow would send the animal fleeing to another hole, possibly a mile away. When the hunter located a breathing hole, he began the wait. This was not a wait measured in minutes, but in hours. In the depths of winter, it could extend beyond an entire day. The hunter would stand motionless above the hole, his harpoon poised, waiting for the subtle sound of the seal surfacing to breathe. Some hunters inserted a fine piece of bird bone or caribou hair into the hole, watching for the slightest movement that would indicate the seal had returned. The cold during this vigil was profound. The hunter's breath froze on his parka hood, forming a ring of ice crystals around his face. His feet, even protected by sealskin boots stuffed with dry grass for insulation, began to numb. He could not stamp his feet or swing his arms to generate warmth. Any vibration transmitted through the ice would alert the seal. This hunt demanded a kind of stillness that transcended physical endurance. It was a meditation, a complete surrender to the rhythm of the ice and the sea. When the seal finally surfaced, the action was explosive. The hunter drove his harpoon downward through the breathing hole, feeling for the impact that meant he had struck flesh. The harpoon head was designed to toggle inside the seal's body, preventing the animal from escaping. Attached to the harpoon was a strong line made from braided seal skin, and at the other end of this line was the hunter's life. A ringed seal in the water is powerful, capable of pulling a man off his feet. The hunter had to widen the breathing hole quickly, using a specialized ice chisel, pulling the seal upward even as it struggled to dive. The ice surrounding the hole was slippery with seawater and blood. The hunter's hands, which had been protected by mittens during the wait, were now bare to maintain grip on the harpoon line, exposed to cold that could cause frostbite in minutes. This was the moment where patience transformed into urgent, decisive action. Once the seal was pulled onto the ice, the work of providing food for the family began. Nothing was wasted. The Inuit had no word for waste. Every part of the seal had a purpose, and the winter diet reflected this total utilization. The seal was butchered on the ice, and one of the first acts was often the most important from a nutritional standpoint.
The internal anatomy
The
of
hunter
the
would
ringed
make an
seal is
incision
remarkably
and
rich
drink
in
some of the
nutrients.
seal's blood
Notice
while it
the
was still
adrenal
warm.
glands.
To many outsiders, this practice seemed savage, but it was pure survival science. The Inuit winter diet was almost entirely composed of meat and fat, with virtually no plant material available for months. This meant no vitamin C, a nutrient that prevents scurvy. Cooked meat destroys vitamin C, but fresh, raw seal blood contains it. The hunter was not indulging in a primitive ritual. He was preventing a disease that killed countless European Arctic explorers who refused to adopt indigenous dietary practices. The seal's blubber, a layer of fat that could be 2 to 3 inches thick depending on the season, was carefully removed in large sections. This blubber, called uksuk, was the most valuable part of the seal in winter. It was food,
The Kolik lamp,
fuel,
fueled by rendered
and
seal
light.
blubber, was the
A family
cornerstone
would
of
eat
winter
blubber
survival,
raw,
providing
slicing it into
essential
thin strips that melted on the tongue, providing an immediate surge of calories in a form that the human body could metabolize into heat. The importance of this cannot be overstated. In an environment where the body burned calories at an accelerated rate simply to maintain core temperature, fat was not just nutrition. It was survival energy in its most concentrated form. A single pound of seal blubber contains approximately 4,000 calories. A hunter working on the ice in winter might require 6,000 calories per day just to maintain body weight. But seal blubber served purposes beyond direct consumption. Rendered into oil by gently heating it in stone or soapstone lamps called quillik, seal blubber became the light and heat source for the winter dwelling. These lamps were engineering marvels in their simplicity. A shallow dish carved from soapstone held the rendered oil, and a wick made from Arctic cotton or dried moss drew the oil upward to burn with a steady, smokeless flame. The woman of the household tended this lamp with constant attention, trimming the wick to maintain the perfect flame height. Too high and precious oil was wasted. Too low, and the dwelling grew cold. This lamp could raise the interior temperature of a snow house from 40 below zero to a comfortable 50 degrees Fahrenheit, creating a pocket of livable warmth in the vast frozen darkness outside. The flame also provided light during the months when the sun barely rose, allowing the family to see, to repair tools, to sew clothing, to maintain the technologies that kept them alive. The seal meat itself was prepared and eaten in ways that maximized nutrition and minimized waste. Much of it was eaten frozen, sliced thin with a sharp knife and consumed raw. This practice, called kwak, preserved all the nutrients that cooking would destroy. The meat was not thawed before eating. The Inuit had learned that partially frozen meat was actually easier to cut into delicate slices, and eating it frozen provided a different kind of sustenance. The body had to work to warm the frozen meat to body temperature, but this was offset by the nutritional density and the fact that frozen meat could be eaten slowly, extending the psychological satisfaction of the meal. Frozen seal meat also stored perfectly. In a world without refrigeration, the entire landscape was a freezer. A meat cached under rocks or in snow remained perfectly preserved for months. Some seal meat was also cooked, boiled in soapstone pots, or later in metal pots traded from Europeans. Boiling had a critical advantage. The resulting broth contained nutrients leached from the meat and bones, and this hot liquid provided warmth from the inside out. On days when hunters returned from the ice exhausted and chilled to the bone, seal broth could be life-saving. The fat that rose to the surface of the broth was skimmed off and consumed separately or saved. Even the seal's organs became food. The liver, rich in vitamin A, was eaten with care because it could contain toxic levels if from a seal that had been feeding on certain prey. The kidneys, heart, and intestines were all consumed, each providing different nutrients. The stomach was cleaned and used as a storage container for rendered oil or fermented meat. Beyond seal, other marine mammals provided crucial winter sustenance. Walrus, massive pinnipeds that could weigh more than a ton, were hunted when conditions allowed. A single walrus could feed a family for weeks and provide enough blubber to fuel lamps through the darkest months. But walrus hunting was dangerous in winter. These animals had tusks longer than a man's arm and the strength to overturn a small boat or punch through thin ice. Hunting them required multiple hunters working together, often from the edge of the shore ice where walrus hauled out to rest. The harpoon had to strike perfectly, and the retrieval required skill and courage that bordered on recklessness. Yet the reward justified the risk. Walrus skin, nearly an inch thick, Haldor was used for rope and boat covering. The ivory tusks became tools and trade goods. The meat, darker and stronger tasting than seal, was nonetheless welcomed as variety in the winter diet. Bearded seal, called ugjuk, larger than ringed seal and weighing up to 600 pounds, was another winter prize. The bearded seal's hide was particularly valuable for making the soles of boots and for boat covers, but the meat and blubber followed the family through winter. These larger seals were harder to catch at breathing holes because they often fed in deeper water. But skilled hunters knew areas where bearded seals concentrated, and the effort to hunt them paid off in abundance. The winter months also brought opportunities to hunt caribou, although this was more feasible for inland groups or those who could travel to areas where small herds remained. Caribou hunting in winter was brutally difficult. The animals were scattered, wary, and difficult to approach across open snow where any movement was visible for miles. But caribou provided something seal could not: variety in texture and taste, and hides that were essential for winter clothing. The meat was leaner than seal, which meant it had to be eaten with fat to provide adequate calories. The Inuit practice of eating meat with blubber was not preference, it was nutritional necessity. Protein poisoning, sometimes called rabbit starvation, occurs when humans eat lean meat without sufficient fat. The body cannot process protein beyond a certain ratio without fat and carbohydrates. In the Arctic winter, with no plant foods available, every meal of caribou meat was accompanied by seal blubber, or the caribou's own back fat if the animal had been caught before it burned through its reserves. Fish, too, played a role in the winter diet, though fishing through ice required different techniques than the open water fishing of summer. Arctic char, a cold water fish related to salmon and trout, remained in certain lakes and rivers throughout winter. The Inuit would locate areas where fish congregated, often near where streams entered lakes, or in deeper pools that did not freeze solid. Using a specialized ice chisel, they would cut holes through ice that might be several feet thick. Through these holes, they would fish using lines made from braided sinew, with hooks carved from bone or ivory, baited with pieces of seal meat or fish. Catching fish through the ice was cold, patient work, but it provided a welcome change from seal and was particularly valued for feeding dogs, which were essential for winter transportation. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Inuit winter diet was the practice of fermenting and aging meat, creating foods that provided concentrated nutrition and unique flavors. Iguanak, or fermented walrus meat, was made by burying fresh walrus meat in a sealskin bag, or wrapping it in walrus hide and placing it in a cache dug into the permafrost or covered with rocks. Over weeks or months, the meat would ferment, developing a strong flavor and a soft texture. This fermentation was not spoilage in the dangerous sense. It was a controlled process that broke down proteins and made certain nutrients more bioavailable. Fermented meat could be eaten in the depths of winter, providing food that did not need to be thawed or cooked, requiring no fuel to prepare. Similarly, seal meat and fish were sometimes fermented, and whole seal flippers were buried and aged until the bones could be easily pulled free and the meat eaten with minimal preparation. The winter diet was also supplemented by foods cached during the more abundant seasons. During late summer and early autumn, families worked intensively to preserve food for winter. Seal and fish were dried in the wind and sun, becoming lightweight and shelf-stable. Berries, including crowberries, blueberries, and cranberries, were picked in enormous quantities and stored in seal oil, which acted as a preservative. These berries, rich in vitamin C, were life-saving in winter. A spoonful of berries preserved in seal oil provided nutrition that no amount of fresh meat could offer. Families also cached frozen fish and meat in stone cairns or underground pits dug into the permafrost, creating a winter pantry that could be accessed when fresh hunting was unsuccessful. The Inuit relationship with food in winter was governed by principles of sharing and reciprocity that were as important as the hunting techniques themselves. A successful seal hunt was not a private triumph. The meat was distributed according to complex social rules that ensured everyone in the community had enough. The hunter who made the kill received certain portions, but relatives, elders, and those who had been less fortunate in their own hunting received shares as well. This was not charity. It was survival strategy. Right in an environment where even the most skilled hunter could go days or weeks without success, a culture of sharing meant that no one starved while others feasted. The hunter who gave generously when times were good could expect to receive when his own luck turned. This created a social safety net more reliable than any cold storage could provide. Women played an essential role in winter food security, though their work is often overlooked in narratives that focus on hunting. While men were on the ice hunting seal or traveling inland for caribou, women managed the household food supply with skill that bordered on wizardry. They knew exactly how much seal oil remained in the lamp and how to ration it so that light and heat lasted until the next successful hunt. So they knew how to process frozen meat so that it could be eaten even by small children and elders with poor teeth. They prepared the skin clothing that allowed hunters to survive on the ice, and they repaired this clothing constantly because a torn seam could mean death from exposure. They processed seal intestines, cleaning and scraping them until they became translucent, then stitching them into waterproof garments and bags. They rendered blubber into oil, tended the kulik lamps, and made decisions about when to use cached food and when to wait in hope of fresh hunting success. The children, too, contributed to winter food security in ways appropriate to their age and ability. Young children helped gather snow from melting into drinking water, as a task that required constant attention because the household needed water, but fuel was precious.
Control the blade angle, keep it steady.
Older children helped with processing
That's how you
meat,
maximize the
learning
yield
the
from
knife
venison.
skills that
Good
would
work.
define their adult lives. They helped repair
That's it.
equipment,
Keep that rhythm.
feed dogs, and
Now
maintain
feel
the
the
winter dwelling.
consistency. That's
In
how you
learning
know
these
it's ready
tasks,
for the baking.
they absorbed the knowledge that had kept
See
their
how the
people
fox
alive
uses
for
the wind to
generations.
find its prey.
They
It's
learned to
moving
read
very
weather, to
quietly
judge
now.
ice
Exactly.
conditions,
The
to
patterns in the
understand
snow
animal
tell us
behavior.
everything.
They learned that survival in the Arctic winter was not about dominating nature, but about understanding it so completely that you could move within its rhythms. The spiritual dimension of the winter diet cannot be separated from its practical aspects. The Inuit believed that animals gave themselves to hunters who showed respect and followed proper protocols. Before hunting, rituals were observed. After a successful hunt, specific treatments of the animal's body showed gratitude and respect. The soul of a seal was believed to reside in its bladder, and in some regions, seal bladders were saved throughout winter and returned to the sea in a spring ceremony, thanking the seals and encouraging them to return. This was not superstition divorced from practical reality. It was a worldview that recognized the profound relationship between hunter and hunted, that understood that success in the Arctic required humility and respect for the forces that sustained life. The winter diet of the Inuit was almost entirely animal-based, containing virtually no fruits, vegetables, or grains for months at a time. By conventional nutritional wisdom, this should have resulted in catastrophic health problems. On scurvy should have been inevitable. Vitamin deficiencies should have been rampant. Heart disease from high fat consumption should have been epidemic. Yet none of these occurred. The Inuit remained healthy, strong, and active throughout the winter on a diet that would horrify a modern nutritionist. The explanation
True
lies in the
sustainability
quality and
means
variety
honoring
of the
the
animal
entire
foods
animal.
consumed, and
These
the
organ
wisdom
meats are
of eating the
nutrient-dense
entire animal.
powerhouses, providing
Organ meats provided vitamins that muscle meat lacked. Raw and fermented foods preserved nutrients that cooking destroyed. The high fat content, particularly omega-3 fatty acids from marine mammals, provided not just calories, but essential nutrients.
This refinement
The Inuit
represents
diet was
countless
not
generations
primitive.
of adaptation.
It was sophisticated.
It is a
more
sophisticated
refined through
wisdom
countless
passed down through
generations
the food
into a
itself.
perfect adaptation to an environment that offered limited options but rewarded deep knowledge. As winter finally loosened its grip and the sun began to climb higher each day, the ice started to crack and shift. Seals became easier to hunt as they hauled out onto the ice to bask in the strengthening light. Migratory birds returned, providing eggs and meat. The sea ice broke apart, opening lids of dark water where whales could be hunted. Fish began to run in the rivers. The summer abundance returned, and with it, variety in the diet. But the lessons of winter remained. The cached foods that had sustained the family through the darkest months were a testament to planning and foresight. The techniques of hunting, processing, and preserving food that had meant the difference between life and death were passed down to the next generation. The winter diet of the Inuit was more than nutrition. It was a complete system of knowledge, a technology as sophisticated as any developed by humans, and a proof that resilience and ingenuity can flourish even in the harshest environments on Earth.